guys, so tonight we will be talking about cameras, and it will be about this D40 that was manufactured back in 2006. It's an entry-level Nikon DSLR, and this guy, which is the Canon 800D, manufactured back in 2017. Now I'm not gonna let these cameras go head to head, but let's see how a 14-year-old camera stacks up against 3-year-old DSLR. So more or less they are both the entry levels of their generation. So one from Nikon, one from Canon. So let's talk about the specs on these. So for the specs, I have my laptop ready here because I'm not much of a specs guy. So I pulled the information up from imaging-resource.com. I'm not sure how reliable this source is, but it is a source nonetheless, so feel free to correct me once or on the comment section. So let's go on with the specs. First with the Nikon D40. So the Nikon D40, it has 6.10 megapixel. I imagine 14 years ago that would have been a lot of megapixels. I'm not sure. So APS-C size sensor. It weighs at around 737 grams. So it's a very, very light camera. Actually, the lens I have here, I think it is the kit lens for the D90, which is a few steps above this Nikon. So it's the Nikon D90. And it was sold for around $600 back in 2006. $600, around 35 pesos. It's not indicated here if it's with the lens or not. So native ISO is 200 to 1600, that's pretty low. Extended ISO up to 3200. Shutter up to 1/4000 to 30 seconds, pretty much standard to all APS-Cs, I think. And the max aperture for the lens is 3.5. It's a variable lens, so 3.5 to 5.6 is the 18 to 105. Now a little background on this camera is my dad bought it for the family back in 2008. So when I had this was already a 2-year-old camera, and this was initially for my younger brother. He was into photography back in high school. He was in the media group thing. So they got this for him initially, and then it hasn't been used for the last maybe 10 years, 9 years. So I found it in my mom's closet, found the chargers, charged up the batteries. It was still working. The lenses didn't have fungus or dust in them. It was pretty well kept for the age. Still feels kind of solid. So yeah, that's it for the D40. Now going to the 800D. Now this camera is my baby. So this was the first camera I ever bought with my own money. I bought this last year, October 2019. So again, when I got this, it was around already a 2-year-old camera. It originally came with the original kit lenses, which was the 18 to 55, 4 to 5.6. But I also got a nifty 50, the 51.8 when I got it. But I replaced the kit lens with this one, the 18 to 135 mm, 3.5 to 5.6 image stabilized. And I already sold the kit lens for this, so I think these two can match up pretty well. So background story on this camera is, this is the first camera I bought because this is the first camera I was using when I was getting into photography. So I started with the phone. I think a lot of us started with the phone. I was using the Note 10 Plus, but yeah, it wasn't enough for me anymore. So I bought this also to try and teach myself something new and to distract myself from the fact that I was entering a long distance relationship. So that's one. And then now to the specs. Now this has 4 times the megapixels of this old camera here. This one has 24.2 megapixels. It is heavier by 10 grams only, which is surprising because if you look at the size difference of these two, it's pretty big. It's a pretty big size difference between them. So the native ISO is 100 to 25,600 on this one, extendable up to 51,200. But based on experience, once you get it to 1,600 ISO, you start to really introduce noise into the images. It has a viewfinder and an LCD live view. So with the Nikon, you don't have the live view. It's also an APS-C sensor, but the sensor is smaller by a little bit compared to the D40. So yeah, it was manufactured in April 2017. I got it at November 2019. This is a pretty solid camera. So I recently, not really replaced it, but it will be a complementary camera to my new camera, which I will be talking about maybe next week. But yeah, it's a pretty solid camera. Now, I already took some photos earlier to try and compare the results from these cameras, but I did not edit any of these. I did not crop any of these. This will be straight from camera, and we will be checking them out in the computer. Let's go. Okay, so over on the left side is the D40 and over on the right side is the 800D. So these were both shot at ISO 400, 18mm, 3.5 aperture, and 1/125 shutter speed. And right off the bat, you can see that the colors on the 800D are punchier, especially there in the middle, and on the car, punchy. I think on the Nikon D40, I'm not sure, but on the Nikon D40, there's a bit of like a haze. I don't know if it's because of the lens or it's because of the age of the camera, but right off the bat, you can see here that the Canon 800D just beats the Nikon D40, but it's not that far. I mean, let's compare. Alright, again, so on the left it's the Nikon D40, on the right it's the Canon 800D. The Canon 800D had more separation because it actually went up to 135mm as compared to the 105mm reach of the Nikon. So I made a boo-boo on that one. But both cameras produced a decent image, I believe. I think the 800D is a bit sharper on the middle, and they both produced decent bokeh, so the blurring of the background. So on the telephoto end, there isn't really much difference, again, except maybe the 800D had the punchier colors on the image, but overall it's not that much of a difference. Maybe it's just the reach. Maybe if you add the extra 30mm reach for the D40, you could achieve something similar, but again, not bad for a 14-year-old camera. So I will try to edit these photos and let's see how much of a difference it makes. Like, how difficult was it to edit the images from the D40? They were both shot at RAW, so these are RAW files. You're looking at RAW files. So let's try to edit. See. I did minor changes to the image. I edited the D40 images first and then just copied those settings and pasted it on the 800D photos. And right off the bat, I noticed is when I copied and pasted the edits, for some reason they were shot at the same settings, but for some reason the images were brighter on the 800D, so I had to lower the exposure down a bit. So let's check it out. Alright, so the one on the left is the Nikon D40 and the one on the right is the 800D. Right away I noticed that the center of the picture is much sharper on the 800D. So if you look at the gates, the difference on the gate, it's much sharper. I get more detail, I get more color, I get more texture from the gate. But when you zoom out, you can't really notice it unless you really look at it. And again, not bad for a 14-year-old camera. So yeah, it's not really that noticeable. Or comparing these two photos, I had the same experience while I was editing these two photos, because when I pasted the setting on the 800D photo, it was brighter, so I had to pull back a bit. But you can see the pink is much more saturated on the 800D, the colors are punchier. But the Nikon D40 image, man, for a 14-year-old camera, that really looks amazing. I mean, if you have this lying around and you want to practice photography, you don't have to buy a camera, you can just use it. I mean, look at that. It's not much of a difference really, and I'm not the greatest photographer there. So I'm back. So you saw the photos that I took with the Nikon D40 and the Canon 800D, and I was fairly surprised with the images that the D40 took. I took with the D40. Final thoughts is, if you have this lying around the house and you want to practice photography, you don't have to buy a camera. Maybe you can buy a lens, but you don't have to buy a new body, because if you're just starting, you can produce really nice photos out of this. I actually just bought this because I was also into making videos, and this doesn't have video capability. And if you're trying to look for one used in Facebook Marketplace, you can get it from around 7,500 to 10,000 pesos with lenses. So if you're not into video and you're just into photography, you can definitely get this. But if you're also into video, I suggest it's much pricier, but you can get this used for around 25 to 30,000 pesos, maybe with a kit lens used. And it has video capability. It can produce, as you can see, it produced those images with just a kit lens. Again, these kit lenses are getting better every time. So, alright, that's it for me. If you're new to the channel, if you haven't already, please press subscribe. Press the bell so you're notified every time I have a new video. Leave a like. Tell me your thoughts down in the comment sections. Follow me on my Instagram, link down below in the description. And that's it for me. Peace!